Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and in today's episode, I would love the opportunity to share some of the most impactful lessons in listening and communication I learned from conducting interrogations. Often when people think about interrogations, they think about what they see on TV or what they hear on the news, and they think about people leaning over a table and screaming and yelling and threatening and demanding and probably faking that you have evidence and maybe looking over your shoulder to see who's looking through the two-way mirror behind you, all of these things. And I am very proud to say that that is not an experience myself or any of my teammates ever participated in. In fact, one of the goals we had amongst a stack of goals going into all of our conversations was to work as hard as we could to make it not feel like an interrogation, because I don't think that's a conversation anybody would really enjoy participating in. So the more we could make it feel like two professionals having a conversation, the easier it is to help people open up and share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances and in the face of consequences. But even with that as a backdrop, it was definitely a unique learning environment. So when people ask me, Mike, how did you get into listening from interrogation? It's probably worth explaining at least a little bit of the context where I come from. So I spent over half of my career in interview and interrogation working for an organization where my teammates and they were in the exact same situation I was. So I want to be clear up front. There were several of us that were operating in this context consistently. So as we look back at the investigations we were asked to participate in, often we were asked to come in, more than often, the majority of the time, we were asked to come in and have conversations with people in cases that had been stalled, typically for months, maybe weeks, but usually months. There was multiple suspects, no evidence. Everybody had already been interviewed and nobody had told the truth about what happened. We're coming in that scenario. Now, I could break that scenario down for days and bore everybody to death, but for the basic context, we're coming in to talk to people who, whether they're a victim, witness, or suspect, are likely already unhappy, we'll just use that as a term, to still be participating in an investigation this long, that innocent or truthful people are being dragged along. They don't like that. The person or people who might have been involved in any wrongdoing certainly doesn't want to keep being brought back in for more conversations. And when it comes to the thought process of the person who might have done something wrong against the law, against policy, whatever it might have been, at this point, they should be pretty confident they got away with it and there's no evidence. And often we have to kind of unpack the conversations that were had in advance so we can strategize for our next conversations. Now, thankfully, we were pretty consistently successful in that environment because we learned to listen. If we are called in to have conversations with people that are already annoyed, nervous, defensive for any number of reasons, if we come in and try to force this conversation down the road we want it to go right away, it's almost certainly not going to work. But if we can come in and lead with listening, that can take us to a place where now we have the ability to build an unexpected bond that leads us to the truth by the end of the conversation. And this was true, by the way, not just for the suspects, which is often what people think about, but it's true for victims and witnesses as well. You know, if you think about it, a witness probably doesn't want to keep recounting what he or she saw because nobody wants to be a snitch. There's potential risks associated with that. Also, there's a risk of not being believed. We could go on and on. If you think about a victim, how many victims want to continue to retell their story? When they retell their story, not only do they have to go through the emotions of telling it, but reliving it. And in a sense, there's some re-victimization that goes on there that, again, I won't bore everybody to death today, but there's a lot that goes into that. So whether we were interviewing victim, witness, suspect, and honestly, sometimes even the people that hired us weren't super thrilled to tell us the truth about everything that had been going on before we got there. So let's use some of these techniques in those conversations too. But in all of those conversations, we were going to have to work through multiple things. I mean, it's fair to say that often when we were interacting with these individuals, they might go through multiple masks, if you will, during the conversation. Who did they feel like they needed to be? Who did they think we wanted them to be? What were their goals or outcomes? How could they get there? We were going to have to work through that. We're probably going to have to work through some emotional roller coasters, and the peaks and valleys on those could be really high, really low. The twists and turns could be all over the place. We're going to have to ride that with people. We're going to have to navigate resistance, people getting to know us. We're a stranger. We're coming in. Why are we sitting here? There's no table in between us. What's going on? So we had to work through all of that. And in every single one of our conversations, we always, and I'm extremely proud of the men and women that I worked with for this, we always prioritized the truth and the experience of the people sharing it over everything else. That is what mattered. And when we step back and look at prioritizing the truth and the experience of the people who we're going to ask to share that truth, there is a waterfall of lessons in listening and communication that come from that. And I'm going to share the top 10 plus one because I can't, I mean, 10 makes for a good list, right? But I'm not just going to stop it there. So the first lesson in listening I'm going to share that I learned in the interrogation room is, man, we have a lot more in common with people than we think. I can't tell you how many times I was having a conversation and just during the rapport building stage. And by the way, there's an article based on a research study in the FBI bulletin. I don't know how many years ago now. It could be 20 years ago by now. I don't recall. But they said that one of the biggest mistakes, if not the biggest mistake, that interviewers make is they skip the rapport building process during an interview. And I think that can be said for many of us, whether in business development, negotiations, candidate interviewing, leadership, performance management conversations. Missing that opportunity to build rapport is a huge mistake. We don't want to spend too much time there either. Conversation for another day. We don't want to ruin our credibility. But during that rapport building stage, and to quote my buddy Dave Thompson, rapport isn't just a stage. We often start building it up front, but we have to continue building it, maintaining it, adding to it throughout the course of our conversations. People start to reveal things about themselves. And you start sitting there thinking, I have something in common, like legitimately something in common with this person. When you think about the universality of the human experience, to some degree, we come from families. To some degree, we all have challenges. To some degree, we all have goals. Like there's things that we all experience in life. So whether it was suspects giving me book recommendations, suspects giving me restaurant recommendations, suspects eventually telling us other people who were involved. There's lots that we could learn. But there were plenty of times where I thought, if, but not for these circumstances, that's somebody that I could hang out with. If, but not for chances in my life, how many turns away was I from being in a similar situation to this person? As a parent, what's the length that I would go to take care of my child or family compared to the lengths that they went through? Did they have a similar education background? Were they into similar sports? Some of it's surface level, but we had so much in common with the people that we spoke with. Sometimes people who had done or committed crimes that, you would think it would be hard to look that other person in the eye for an hour plus and treat them like a human being. But when we recognize the universality of the human experience, what we're all going through, it's a lot easier to connect with human beings and work our way through sometimes these emotionally taxing conversations. With that, and I kind of touched on this already, we have an opportunity to learn from everyone. I learned so much from the people that I interviewed, and not just in relation to the case, like I alluded to in the last one, because I may as well cannibalize my own list, whether it was book recommendations, restaurant recommendations, learned about their business. How did their business operate? How does their industry operate? And I learned more about manufacturing and marketing and creative design and accounting. Math isn't my thing. Just from listening to people that I was interviewing, learning perspective on life, music, hobbies, little things that a lot of times when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're teaching you these things, it might seem like it's not important now, but they create the bridges for us to keep this rapport building and going throughout the conversation. So just right out of the gate, if we stop and we think really anybody we're interacting with, there's a good chance we have way more in common with this person than we thought. They're another human being breathing oxygen on our planet. And there's got to be something I can learn from them. We're already ahead of the game if we can start to make those two pivots and how we listen and initially engage with people. This next one, number 3, tends to catch people off guard. And I'm probably going to have to do an episode just dedicated to this in the very near future, maybe a couple actually. Take a look at it from different angles. But one of potentially the most powerful lessons in listening that I learned from a career in interview and interrogation was that it's okay for people to lie to me. I said it. It's okay for people to lie to me. Let's think about it. If I'm having a conversation with somebody, they did something they weren't supposed to do. Doesn't matter. Who cares what it was? But they know that there could be consequences for those actions. They're probably not going to walk in, sit down, and say, Mike, let me save you the trouble. Here's everything I did. Naturally, they're going to want to avoid those consequences. They could be a great person. It could have been a mistake. They could have already changed their behavior and it's never going to happen again. I'm not here to judge them. We're going to add that one to the list too. But they're not going to want to get in trouble. When people lie to us, they're often executing what they believe to be their last available good decision. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm not saying that I'm signing off on it as a good decision, but it's all I got left. So they're going to lie to us in order to avoid one or a series of consequences. It has nothing to do with us. They'd be lying to anybody who was sitting in that chair in front of them. So once I was able to realize that lying or getting lied to, excuse me, there's a very clear separation there. Getting lied to in these conversations was really just part of the game. It's something that the people I was speaking with sometimes honestly felt like they were supposed to do. They needed to work through that. They needed to give it a shot. Now I could learn not to take it personally. I could learn to treat that as any other strategically applicable part of the conversation. And I could really start to listen to those lies for intelligence. What's the fear that's motivating the lie? What's the emotion that's associated with the lie? How strong or emphatic were they with it? Or how confident were they in how they delivered it? All of these things could help give me the opportunity to use the lie they gave me to create a new path forward to the truth. We're going to have to spend a lot more time breaking that down. But if you want to change your life from a communication standpoint, stop getting mad when people lie to you. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying that we should raise a world full of dishonest people, but most of us are going to tell the truth until the truth becomes problematic. Then we're going to stray just far away from it, just long enough until we're past the problematic time and we come back to telling the truth. So if we look at it as a face-saving process, if we look at it as a survival mechanism, now we can start to look at in any given situation, we're going to come back to, are they really lying? And is it healthy to even try to catch people lying? These are all conversations to have. But in scenarios where you're confident somebody is lying to you before taking it personally, before seeing it as a moral affront, and then letting those emotions drive how you respond, if we can stop to think they're executing what they believe to be their last available good decision, we can respond more strategically and create something good. We can actually build the relationship based on the dishonest information we were shared. And with that comes number 4. And number 4 is people need to save face and protect their self-image. Remember, all a confession is asking somebody to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences. That's it. So if we're going to ask somebody to do that in any context, they're going to need to save face and protect their self-image. Causing people to feel attacked, causing people to feel judged, causing people to feel embarrassed. There are mountains of research from multiple disciplines that tell us how bad of an approach and how ineffective of an approach that really is. If we can help people save face, if we can help them save their self-image, if we can help them align the commitment to the truth with their self-image, it's okay for them to tell us the truth now because it aligns with how they see themselves acting. Conservatively, that's 80% of the battle. It might honestly be 90% of the battle in order to get somebody to commit to telling the truth under vulnerable circumstances. We should be going out of our way to help people save face and protect their self-image, which is why number 5 is so important to consider. The 5th one, and this kind of piggybacks on what we just talked about with lying, is we should be embracing excuses because they are the expressway to the truth. And I know telling people to embrace excuses, maybe some of you just hung up on me. Maybe some of you threw up in the back of your mouth a little bit. I am a card carrying, flag waving, heel defending believer in accountability. I'm not saying we should let people off the hook for the excuses that they give us. That's not the message at all. But if you think about it, when somebody says, I'm sorry, I did it because, whatever comes after that because is generally an excuse. And we tend to get very upset when we hear that excuse because we hear it as an abdication of accountability, responsibility, ownership. It violates our values, our morals, our corporate culture, all of these things, right? We get so mad at what comes after the because, that we don't even register what came before the because. I did it, or I didn't do it, whichever. The excuse that comes after the because is the face-saving mechanism that allowed them to make the admission that came before the because. People need to save face. That was how they chose to save face in order to make the admission. So if we think about it, we can't solve a problem that's not on the table. They use the excuse to put the problem on the table. So from now on, I'm not saying we're going to let people off the hook. There's a big difference between accepting and agreeing. Let's get that out there. But from now on, one way, again, we'll have to dedicate a whole nother episode to this coming up. But from now on, if somebody says to you, I'm sorry I did it because, or I'm sorry I didn't do it because, after the because, respond with a curious tone with their name, thank you, an affirmation statement, and a follow-up question. Name, thank you, affirmation statement, follow-up question. So it could simply be, Dave, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I wasn't aware. Please walk me through in as much detail everything you've experienced. By me asking him to walk me through in as much detail, now I'm forcing him to build on that excuse. If it's a real reason, he'll be able to. If it's just an excuse, it'll fall apart and he'll lead himself back to accountability. From all the conversations I've ever had, the combination of those three lessons right there have changed my life. It is okay to be lied to. People are exercising what they believe to be their last available good decision. I've got to go out of my way to help them save face. And when they give me excuses, that is their face-saving technique to be able to admit. So if I get the truth in stages, I get away from that like Hollywood version of the truth. Give me the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. I want you to tell me that you did it, that you knew it was wrong, that you're sorry, that'll never happen again. You've been lying to me the whole time. Come on. That's 5 different admissions. Each one gets harder and harder. But if we think about getting the truth in stages, I'm sorry, I did it. It's not my fault. Boom. We just got the first I did it. We can build on that. Thank you, Dave. I wasn't aware. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Let's unpack that a little bit more. Now we're going to start working for the details. Excuses are the expressway to the truth. As we kind of dovetail on that, it's important to consider the next one. I think we're up to number 6 at this point. If somebody else has information and I need it, they're in control of the conversation, not me. So I can add structure to the conversation. I can add guide rails to the conversation. I can have a path that I want to walk through in the conversation. But allowing the other person to feel as if they are in control of the conversation is going to help me get the truth faster. The concept of control is associated with power and psychological safety. So if somebody feels like they don't have control of the conversation, they feel like they don't have power or psychological safety, which means they have to fight for it. So now they're having a different conversation than I am. Generally, if somebody doesn't feel like they have control, agency, power, psychological safety, their guard is up. They feel more vulnerable. They need to protect themselves. But if I can make it easier for them to feel those things, their guard goes down. And when their guard comes down, now it's easier for them to open up. It's easier for them to speak with me. It's easier for them to go through the mental gymnastics necessary to commit, align their self-image with telling the truth. So I don't want to wrestle control from somebody. I don't want to dominate and try to control a conversation. I want to let the other person feel as if they're in control and then just steer the conversation where I need it to go patiently over time in order to arrive at the truth and the outcome that we need, which directly sets up number 7. The direct path is often the path of most resistance. If we were in an investigative interview and I sat down and just asked somebody, did you do it? Or I know you did it. Or tell me that you did it. Or let's just cut right to the chase. We've got a bunch of evidence, which by the way, we never really did. So just tell me what you did right now. All of those things put people in defensive immediately. Wait a minute. Where is this going? What's this about? What could happen to me? I need to learn more. I'm going to be quiet. The direct path is the path of most resistance. The direct path is going to maximize people's defensive reaction. Where a conversation starts doesn't matter, as long as we're clear on where it needs to end. So, if we're comfortable allowing other people to feel like they're in control of the conversation, we don't force the direct path. We can go back to steering the conversation to the truthful outcome that we require. And to tie another group of three together, giving up control of the conversation actually works in our favor. The direct path is the path of most resistance. The next one and the third one in this triumvirate is patience prevails. Anytime I'm asked, what is the number one skill associated with great listening? The answer is patience. There's probably a couple others that are in serious consideration, but the answer is patience. Because if I can be patient and allow the other person to work through their mental gymnastics, their alternatives, if I can allow the bond to be built between us, if I can find the right outcomes to focus on, if I can find the right ways to help them save face, if I can use the information, the intelligence they're giving me in order to determine the best path forward in this conversation, now I'm going to be more successful. In the context I used to operate in most often, we had this unwritten rule based on a vague Supreme Court decision that said in cases with no evidence where we were having non-custodial conversations, we had roughly 60 minutes to get the first I did it, and then a reasonable amount of time considering the totality of circumstances to get all the details after that. Vague, I know. With a lot of new interviewers, you could see that they were focused more on the time. Oh no, I've only got 60 minutes, and they would rush it. And by rushing it, they would create more defensive mechanisms. They would run into more resistance. They would make things harder for themselves. And a lot of times, yeah, they probably could get some truth, but they probably didn't get close to everything. They left a lot on the table because of the approach. The rush they took created more roadblocks for them. Whereas working with more experienced interviewers, it was clear to watch them. They had 60 minutes. Oh, you don't get cool points for fast confessions. You get cool points for honest and full confessions. So they would take their time. They would walk the path. They would allow the other person to feel like they have some control or agency. They would build rapport. They would work their way there. And if they got their first admission in 17 minutes, great. 27 minutes, fine. 37 minutes, cool. Who cares? We're building the relationship necessary. We're being patient. We're allowing the conversation to come to us. We're gathering intelligence and we're prioritizing our outcomes, which in this case was a commitment to sharing the truth. When it comes to getting the truth, often we've got to ask questions in order to get it. Like I said, most people aren't going to just walk in, sit down and say, well, let me save you some time. Here's everything I did. And in fact, if you got a pen and a piece of paper, I'd be happy just to write it down for you. That's just not going to happen, unfortunately. It would have made for cool videos and cool stories if it ever actually did. So we're going to be asking questions in order to elicit the truth throughout the course of this conversation. And one of the other lessons that I learned is that when it comes to asking questions, the most successful questions are based off what the other person needs to experience to answer honestly. They're not based off what I want to know or what I want to say. And often when we're watching interviewers in any context, it can be very clear which mindset they're operating from. Are they asking a question because it's the question they want to ask? It's the information they want to know. It's comfortable to them. Or are they crafting? Are they staging? Are they setting up? Are they stringing together questions in a way that fit what the other person needs to feel? The person that they're interviewing, the victim, the witness, the suspect, the subject, the candidate, whoever it is. Are they tailoring the questions to what the other person needs to experience? If the questions land in the way that the other person needs to experience it, we will be far more successful obtaining the truth, getting the information that we need, whether it was to close a case, whether it's to land a business deal now, whether it's to incite the behavioral change that we need in one of our employees or maybe even somebody in our family. Who knows what it might be? Those were the top 10. Now I'm going to throw the 11th one on. Focus on outcomes. Often we talk about being present. It's important to be present. Well, it's hard to be present if we don't have a reason. So if we can focus on our outcomes in the cases that we had to work, thankfully, the majority of the time we spoke with good people that made a bad decision based on the situation they were in their life. That doesn't mean I absolve them of responsibility, but if we're being honest with ourselves, had they been in a different situation, they would have made a better decision. And to not recognize that, again, is to not recognize the level of humanity that's involved in these conversations. There were some that didn't quite fit into that, and maybe some people that were more likely to make bad decisions, repeat bad decision makers, those that made decisions outside of the circumstances that they were currently experiencing. But even in the most challenging conversations, focusing on our outcomes, like our outcomes are the truth in detail. Truth that we can substantiate with objective evidence that we can collect after the fact. That's a goal. Like treating everybody with respect and dignity, helping people save face and protect their self-image, always making sure that we're stewards for ourselves, our own organizations, our clients, the law, all of this stuff comes in. But if we can focus on the outcomes, then it's a lot easier to stay present and keep our emotions in check. Somebody's testing you. Someone's trying to get under your skin. Someone's trying to see if they can get you angry or upset. Maybe someone's trying to play the sob story and see if they can get you to really feel like they're the victim. Maybe somebody's trying to test your knowledge, see how much you really know or how in depth you can go in any different direction in the conversation. Whatever it might be, it's a lot easier for us to stay centered, control our emotions, stay present, and find value in all of our observations if we can remain focused on our outcomes. What are the most important outcomes we are looking to achieve today? If we can do all of those things, now we're going to be in much better shape in all of our high impact conversations. So as crazy as it sounds, an accidental career in interview and interrogation taught me that I have way more in common with other human beings than I would have thought about coming into it, and that there is something I can learn from everybody. Literally, it made me a better human. It gave me a more empathetic and more humane look at the people that I was speaking with. And with that as the backdrop, it also taught me that it's okay for people to lie to me. They're going to do it anyway, so there's no need to get upset. Let's learn how to use it to our advantage. Now, if I can help them save face, they'll do it less. And if I realize that when they're giving me excuses, that's a face-saving mechanism, so now I can use that as the expressway to the truth, I can jump on that face-saving train and go in that direction, I'll be so much better off. Again, the direct path is the path of most resistance. So I want to make sure the other person feels like they're in control of the conversation, and I'm as patient as I can be. And that patience will allow me to ask the right questions at the right time, in the right order, that gives them the experience they need in order for them to tell us the truth. And if I can remain focused on outcomes, it's a lot easier for me to manage my breathing, control my emotions, stay focused, and create the new alternatives when I need to during the conversation. Sitting down to have conversations with people when sometimes they knew we were coming, sometimes they didn't, but either way, whether they know we're coming or not, they've been involved in an investigation for months. They've already been interviewed about it at least once, maybe more. For the suspects, they know there's no evidence. For the victims and the witnesses, they can now be worried that the truth might never come out and there's nothing going to be done. And the vulnerability that they subjected themselves to could all be for naught. When we come into these conversations, we can't force them. We won't be successful. We need to engage with people at a level where we can build the relationship, often in short time, that allows them to feel comfortable opening up to some degree. And then as they open up, it's our job to listen to them and let them tell us what they need to experience. It probably won't be direct. Hey, Mike, if you just treat me this way, and if you just ask me that question, if you just smile a little bit, I'll tell you the truth. They're not going to come out and say that. But if we can pay attention to the emotional connotation of their word choice, of their body language, congruency or incongruency, if we can take a look at the big picture, elevate our contextual awareness, focus on the universality of the human experience, we can start to quickly determine what other people need to experience. So they will commit to saying and doing the things we need them to within ethical bounds, of course. And learning to listen to people for them to tell me and my teammates, I want to make sure they're absolutely involved in this, for them to tell us what they needed to experience so we could turn around and give it to them, often on what might amount to be one of their worst days or one of their most emotional moments. Those were powerful lessons that we can now apply to all of our high impact conversations in business, in family, in our personal lives, and beyond. I hope a few of those really struck home. I hope a few of those gave you cause for thought and a way to maybe adapt or revisit some conversations and some of the relationships that you have. Obviously, we go into much more detail in the disciplined listening method. You can find that at disciplinedlistening.com, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places. But I really appreciate you being here for another episode. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to these conversations. Thank you for being open to continuing to evolve as a listener, as a communicator, as a leader in your personal and professional lives. I look forward to continue to seeing you week after week. Thank you so much. Please, while you're here, take a quick moment, subscribe to the show, like the show, share your feedback, share it with your network. We really appreciate all the support. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.